Imagine you're sitting at a green felt table. The air is heavy with the smell of cold coffee and the silent electricity of decisions worth thousands of dollars. The lights are low, focused only on the center of the table, where destiny seems to be decided by pieces of plasticized cardboard. In front of you, an opponent you've been studying for hours pushes all his chips into the center. The sound of the chips hitting each other is dry. Final. You look at your cards. You have the best possible hand at that moment. The math is on your side. The logic is on your side. The decision is technically perfect. You take a deep breath and say, call. The cards turn. You have a 98% chance of winning. The pot already feels like it's yours. Then the dealer flips the last card. A 2 of clubs. The only card in the entire deck that gives your opponent the win. In a second, what was yours disappears. The silence that follows is deafening. At this exact moment, 99% of people do the same thing. They look at the ceiling. They clench their fists. They feel their stomach sink. And they say the most dangerous phrase in the game. I got unlucky. They leave the room telling the story of how they were victims of a cosmic injustice. Of how the universe conspired against them. Of how it was impossible to win that way. But there is 1% that reacts in a completely different way. They don't raise their voice. They don't complain. They don't show anger. They pull out a small notebook. They write down the sequence of the play. They record the opponent's frequency. They aren't looking at the card that fell. They are looking at the process that led them there. And they stand up with the calmness of someone who just paid for parking. You know why? Because while the majority is creating an emotional story about bad luck, they are deciphering an invisible code. And here is the truth that hurts the ego but sets the mind free. Luck, the way you understand it, does not exist. What you call bad luck is just the lazy name you give to a pattern you haven't been able to see yet. Pause for a second. Reflect on your life outside the poker table. How many times have you justified a financial failure, a project that didn't take off, or a relationship that crumbled with the word luck? The human brain is a masterpiece of biological engineering, but it has a fatal manufacturing flaw. It is a machine of emotional self-preservation. It hates to feel pain, and it hates even more to admit it failed due to a lack of preparation. When something goes wrong, your limbic system enters defense mode. It desperately looks for a culprit that isn't you. And that is exactly why luck is the perfect alibi. It protects the ego. It gives you the comfort of being a victim. And, most dangerous of all, it requires zero change. If you lost because you were unlucky, you don't need to study more. If you failed because destiny wanted it, you don't need to adjust your habits. If it was the injustice of the universe, you can stay the exact same person tomorrow. But here is the hidden cost that no one tells you. Blaming luck protects your pride today, but it murders your future in silence. The moment you say I got unlucky, you hand the remote control of your life over to chaos. You are telling your subconscious, there is nothing to learn here. And that thought is the exact point where the cycle of defeat becomes permanent. The professional loser is not the one who falls. It is the one who specializes in building monuments to his falls, blaming the wind, the ground, and the stars. Let's dive into the mechanics of this. In elite poker, we use a term to describe this state of emotional blindness: tilt. Tilt happens when your rational brain is hijacked by your emotions after a loss. You start playing poorly because you feel the game owes you something. You become too aggressive or too passive because you're trying to get revenge on luck. In real life, millions of people live in a state of permanent tilt. They make financial decisions based on past losses. They enter new relationships carrying the trauma of previous bad luck. They operate in the stock market trying to win back what luck took away. Winning was never about avoiding obstacles. Winning is understanding that bad luck is just inevitable statistical noise in any complex system. In professional poker, we call this variance. Variance is the distance between what should happen mathematically and what happens in the immediate reality. The amateur looks at variance and falls into despair. The winner looks at variance and smiles. Because he understands something that changes everything. Variance is the filter that keeps you rich. Think about it. If luck didn't exist in the short term, poker would be exactly like chess. The best player would win 100% of the time. What would happen? Amateurs would stop playing instantly. The ecosystem would die. Luck exists to keep the unprepared in the game. It serves as a drug that feeds the amateur's ego with occasional, unmerited victories, ensuring they keep coming back to hand over their time, their energy, and their money to those who actually study the patterns. Luck is the refuge of amateurs. The pattern is the weapon of masters. Now, let's transpose this to your reality.career.business. Investments. There is a fundamental concept that separates billionaires from gamblers. F plus expected value. Expected value is the foundation of any solid fortune. Imagine this proposal. I invite you to a game of heads or tails. If it's heads, I pay you $1,000. If it's tails, you pay me $10. Do you accept? Any minimally rational person would say yes. It's an obvious mathematical opportunity. Now imagine we play only once. It's tails. You lose $10. Did you make a wrong decision? The amateur, focused on the isolated event, would say, yes, I lost money. I got unlucky. The winner answers, no. I would make that same bet 1,000,000 times, until you run out of money. Because he understands that events don't matter. Series of events matter. The amateur judges life by what happened today. In the micro, the winner judges life by the process he repeats in the macro. This is why people abandon promising businesses in the first bad quarter. They give up on the gym in the second week because the weight didn't drop. They call luck that which is merely temporal myopia. The long term is an implacable judge. It doesn't punish immediately, but it collects with compound interest. Winners don't play against cards. They play against ranges. A range is the set of all possibilities an opponent can have. It is the history, the frequency, the behavior under pressure. In life, patterns work like invisible currents in the air. When you fly in their favor, people say you are lucky. When you fly against them, everything feels heavy, difficult, unfair. Analyze it coldly. Are your financial problems really luck, or a repetitive pattern of seeking immediate gratification? Do your relationships fail because of a bad streak, or because of an unconscious repetition of choosing people who validate your old traumas? Is your career stagnant due to lack of opportunity, or because of a pattern of avoiding the discomfort that growth requires? Patterns are predictable, and everything that is predictable can be anticipated, avoided, or exploited. The master is not someone who predicts the future with a crystal ball. It is someone who recognizes the present before everyone else because they have seen this pattern 1,000 times before. There is a mental trap that keeps people poor and frustrated. The need to find meaning in chaos. When you have a stroke of luck, you convince yourself you're a genius. When you have a stroke of bad luck, you convince yourself you're a victim. Both conclusions are wrong. Winners practice outcome detachment. They become scientists of themselves. If they win a hand playing poorly, they don't celebrate. They get worried. Why? Because they know that winning by playing poorly is the first step to bankruptcy. It is the wrong pattern being rewarded by temporary luck. Luck is the sweetest poison there is. It makes you believe your mediocre process is good enough. On the other hand, losing while playing well is the greatest character test you will ever face. It's easy to maintain discipline when everything is going right. What defines an elite winner is the ability to maintain the pattern when the universe is handing you defeat after defeat. This is what we call volume of play. In the American market, great CEOs don't look at yesterday's profit. They look at the sales system that generates profit consistently. They know that if the system, the pattern, is solid, luck becomes a rounding error. Let's talk about the anatomy of self-destructs. Why is it so hard to break these patterns? The answer lies in a structure in your brain called the amygdala. It is your alarm center. When you suffer a loss, whether it's losing a giant pot in poker or losing a job, the amygdala triggers a threat signal. It doesn't know the difference between a predator in the jungle and a falling stock chart. For most people, this signal is the end of the line. Stress floods the system, logical thinking shuts down, and they enter survival mode. This is where victimhood is born. Victimhood is an evolutionary survival strategy. If I am a victim, I am not a threat. If I am not a threat, the predator might leave me alone. But in the modern world, this strategy is financial and intellectual suicide. Winners train to do the opposite. They use the prefrontal cortex to intercept the amygdala's signal. They feel the pain of the loss, but instead of reacting, they transform it into data. In high-level poker, we call this logical decoupling. It is the ability to separate the feeling of the loss from the analysis of the play. If you cannot decouple your emotions from your results, you will never own your destiny. You will just be a slave to the fluctuations of chance. Your brain wants to prove you are right, even when being right means you are broke. If you believe the system is rigged or I never have luck with investments, your brain will act as a selective reality filter. It will solemnly ignore the 10 obvious opportunities that passed right in front of you, and obsessively focus on the single event that went wrong just to say, "See? I told you so." This creates what I call the aura of bad luck. It's not a mystical energy. It is pure neuroscience applied to perception. When you believe in bad luck, you stop looking for patterns. When you stop looking for patterns, you stop preparing. When you stop preparing, your decisions become mediocre. And when mediocre decisions generate bad results, you go back to the beginning of the cycle saying, I knew I didn't have luck. Winners have the opposite bias, the process bias. They are obsessed with the internal mechanics of things. They don't ask why did this happen to me? They ask how did this system produce this result? Luck is the preferred alibi of those too lazy to study the structure. Radical responsibility hurts because it removes your emotional safety net, but it is liberating because it hands you back the steering wheel. If the problem is luck, you are a frightened passenger. If the problem is the pattern, you are the chief engineer. Consider the life of a professional player who has been winning for 15 years straight. Imagine this man facing economic crises, technological shifts, and younger, more aggressive competitors. Do you really believe he is the luckiest human being in history for 5,475 consecutive days? The statistical probability of that is lower than being struck by lightning while winning the lottery. What he masters, and what you need to master, is the management of the bad beat. In poker, a bad beat is losing when you are the favorite. In life, a bad beat is a partner's betrayal, a sudden illness, or an algorithm change that destroys your business. The loser uses the bad beat as a justification for tilt. He plays poorly for the rest of the day because he's revolted. The winner treats the bad beat as a success tax. He knows that to have access to the extraordinary gains of the long term, he must pay the toll of the short term. Competence is cumulative. Luck is just noise that dissipates with volume. He who improves 1% a day, every day, eventually makes luck irrelevant. In the long run, variance bows to discipline. Life is not a casino. Life is a market of probabilities. And in any market, you only have two options. You can be the player, or you can be the house. The house doesn't need luck. The house doesn't pray for the next customer to win or lose. The house trusts its edge. The house knows that while some players might leave winning today, the mathematical pattern guarantees it will be the winner at the end of the year. When you decide to study patterns, you are changing sides at the table. You are building your own edge. At first, your advantage is small. Everything seems 50-50ths. But as you refine your habits, study your mistakes, and adjust your behavior, the odds shift. It becomes 60-40ths, then 70-30ths, then 80-20ths. At this stage, the world, which is still sleepwalking, will look at you and say, he got so lucky in his career. He got so lucky with that company. They saw the final event. They didn't see the 10-year sequence of pattern adjustments. They saw the 2 of clubs that favored you in the last hand, but they didn't see the 1,000 previous hands where you folded bad pots, just to be alive at that moment. We are reaching the conclusion, and here is the final lesson that separates the men from the boys, the professionals from the eternal amateurs. Life is a game table that never closes. The biggest mistake you can make is not losing a hand, no matter how big it is. The fatal error is believing the game is unfair and, because of that, stopping to play the right way. The universe doesn't have an agenda against you. It doesn't care about your feelings. It is a cold system that responds to input patterns. If you plant disorder, inconsistency, and victimhood, the system will process that and deliver chaos as an output. If you plant structure, data analysis, and emotional resilience, the system will deliver clarity and results. From today on, I challenge you to make a silent pact with your own ego. Every time things go wrong, and they will, and the word luck arises in your mind, bite your tongue. Instead of complaining, perform an autopsy on the event. Ask, what pattern did I ignore? What signal did I fail to read? Where did my edge fail? Replace victimhood with investigation, complaining with strategy. Luck is a fog that blinds the weak. Patterns are the light that guides the strong. And when you learn to see through the fog, the fear of the future disappears. Because in the end, the math of the universe always pays, with interest, those who had the courage to study it. The long term is coming, whether you're ready or not. It doesn't care about your intentions, only your repetitions. If this video changed the way you see your losses, if it gave you a clarity that hurts, but puts you in control, then you have already begun to change your pattern today. If you're ready to stop praying for luck and start building your own edge, subscribe to Mind of a Grinder. Here, we don't sell hope. We dissect strategy.